I am Peter Penoyer, president of the Whiting Foundation. Welcome, all of you. We are so glad to be here together after 2 years of separation and Zoom. This is our 37th Whiting Awards, where we celebrate great talent and great promise. First, on behalf of the trustees, I want to thank Daniel Reed, our director, for his energy and imagination. Our director of writers programs, Courtney Hodell, who many of you have spoken with, cannot be here. She's recovering well from COVID at home, but she's watching us right now on live stream. Yeah. Shout out to Courtney. Yeah. Before we start, a very brief note on our history. Flora Ettlinger Whiting had an eye for beauty. Examples from her collection of American furniture are found at the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the Museum of the City of New York. She also had an instinct for investing. Impressed by a man named Thomas Watson, she put much of her money into a company that made cash registers that we now know as IBM. The $10,000 that she left in 1973 has grown handsomely, supporting hundreds of fellowships in the humanities, other cultural programs, and since 1985, these awards. A few words about our process. About 100 people around the country, authors, editors, teachers, artistic directors, critics, each nominate one author. Then 6, usually quite eminent figures in the cultural world, read 100 books each and meet periodically to deliberate. These deliberations can get intense, not just a quick dust-up, but a 9-month debate. Ours is a stealth operation. We promise the nominators and selectors anonymity, so our winners are chosen in a process free from political pressures and arm twisting. The outcome is a list of the 10 authors the selectors feel are the most promising in the country in this cohort. You are those authors. Each of you will receive a book which the jury has selected as having some special relevance to your writing. And of course, this will be followed by your $50,000 award. We are not only proud to have you winners here tonight, but proud of the roster of laureates you 10 are joining, because they have written so much, so well, and some have been recognized with National Book Awards, National Book Critics Circle Awards, Pulitzer Prizes, MacArthur Fellowships, and often simply treasured by devoted readers and esteemed by their colleagues. Our late board president, Bob Belknap, once remarked that 1 or 2 of the winners may even become a celebrity, but that's not the object of the game, because that's something other people do to you. And what these awards are designed to encourage is for you to go out and produce something that will be wonderful for yourselves. I now present Daniel Reed, who will introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Peter, and welcome everyone. It saddens me very deeply that Courtney could not be here to see you all here at the culmination of the Whiting year. But in characteristic fashion, she has prepared us beautifully and has written an introduction for our keynote speaker that I will read on her behalf. It can feel counter to the project of Maggie Nelson to pin down the nature of her work. But among other things, she is a cultural critic, memoirist, poet, teacher, and explorer of the uncharted interior. Nelson looks hard at things that are hard to look at. She holds certitudes up to the light. Rejecting binaries in favor of complication can seem a radical stance in a time of polarizing rhetoric, but only if it is radical to be curious, to set aside fear, and to embrace pleasure. A MacArthur Fellow and winner of the National Book Critics Circle Award for Criticism, Nelson is the best-selling author of 10 sui generis books in which compact perception flares open to vastness like a silk parachute, catching the shape of something that can't be seen, the movement of thought itself. Her prose poem, Bluets, is built of 240 numbered propositions on grief and desire, all steeped in the color blue. The red parts is a lyric forensic examination of her aunt's murder and the trial of the man eventually convicted of it. Her groundbreaking work, The Argonauts, parses motherhood and queerness, domesticity and becoming. Its frank record of the metamorphosis in her pregnant body and the body of her gender-fluid partner mirrors the form of the book itself. The Argonauts' influence in dissolving the barriers of genre grows year over year, making all manner of new work possible. Nelson's latest book, On Freedom, 4 Songs of Care and Constraint, plunges into the paradox of freedom, our hunger for it, and our inability to bear it. Nelson suggests that freedom is not a state we achieve, but something we work at throughout our lives and together, an act she calls an experiment unending. One of the practices of freedom that Nelson models for us on the page is what she calls thinking aloud with others, drawing deeply on philosophers and artists who have wrestled with the same questions she does. This practice, she notes, does not require that we agree. It requires that we not abandon one another. The joy and the generous demand of her work is that she asks you to think alongside her. Maggie Nelson.
This is like a dream, like a podium and people and sounds. It's crazy. I'm so excited to be here tonight. Thank you guys all for coming out. Congratulations, you guys. You rock. I've read all of your work, so I can really say with a strong measure of confidence that the honor of being here is all mine. Honestly, I don't really know what I'm doing here because you have all so much to say and to teach. You scarcely need any sage words from writing about me, from anyone. You know what there is to know about the state of the world and what words can and can't do in it. So I wanted to get in the mood for this event, and I read all the Whiting keynotes that are posted online, which was really fun. I read Ralph Ellison's, Elizabeth Hardwick's, Lucille Clifton's, Tony Kushner's, and one theme seemed pretty constant. You guessed it, the world's going to hell. Some people even reflected on how often the theme recurred, as I am now in that tradition. This makes sense, as there's always so much suffering and so much peril in all the old and the new ways. I feel all that tonight. I know that you do too. So I want to acknowledge that suffering while also making room for us to feel tremendous possibility and pleasure of this moment. And I mean this moment, this very moment here together in this room, but also more generally about our times, which some have called the shift or the great turning, a tipping point at which certain destructive ways of thinking and being may be in accelerated collapse, and certain opportunities for reorientation and change are strong with us. I know this is a very optimistic read on our situation, but what the hell? I'm an optimist. That doesn't mean I think things are going to get better. It just means I think it's all worth it. To tell you the truth, I was scared to say yes to this invitation. I think back in late summer. I was scared to get on a plane. I was scared to mingle at a reception. I was scared to keep my mask on and come off as the cautious freak who was incapable of letting go. I've been scared of getting sick. I've been scared of bringing illness home to the people with whom I live. I say all this not to be a buzzkill, but because I feel pretty sure I'm not alone in these feelings, which are also in the room with us tonight. We've been through something heavy, and I presume we're all here together tonight because we wanted or needed to be. I wanted to be. I wanted to be here because our togetherness helps us to stay enlivened and committed to our sometimes very solitary work, and it fortifies us to contend with the same forces that keep coming for us again and again, and which are going to keep coming for us in all their guises, from parental rights bills to speech bans to traffic stops to cluster munitions. We have to fill up on the courage we give each other and keep the forces that want to police and discipline and diminish us at bay. We have to keep sharing our fears and achievements in fellowship and reassert our devotion to articulation and world building and play, both in order to eliminate future possibilities, but also to reveal and to feel the fractal lushness of all we already have and all we already are. It might be a little weird to talk about resistance and fellowship or the great turning at a prize ceremony, as prize culture comes with its own set of complications and seductions. It can signify, at least on one level, separation, hierarchy, and the bestowal of value and resources on a precious few. The most indelible and gruesome image that leaps to my mind when I think about prize culture comes from Eileen Miles's poet's novel Inferno, where they talk about books being like packages of meat, quote, cold dead mammals covered in medals and stamps, end quote. In fact, Miles writes, quasi-facetiously, if there's no stamp on it, you almost think the meat's bad. So tonight you get a stamp with all the glory and all the baggage. But again, I've read all your work, so I'm not worried. I know you guys are going to take in all the good feeling and all the encouragement and all the money, and you're going to return all those energies to your work, to your radical, beautiful, spirited, and brave work, the work that you would be doing whether this kind of recognition came or not. And I know that you know about all the predecessors who were never feted in such a room, and whose mere presence here would have been disallowed or a scandal. They're here tonight, too. And I think they're hoping what I'm hoping, which is that this award makes your lives that much easier, your career that much more possible, that you can buy time to write, pay down unjust debts, help take care of another creature, or just buy yourself something stupid and beautiful. I hope and trust you will absorb all that's fantastic about this night and this award and leave the rest behind, glitter streaming from your wings. I did not get an award quite like this at the start of my writing life. I had something of the reverse, wherein after 9 books, my fortunes got pretty massively rearranged by a different award, a MacArthur, which also comes out of the blue, like the Whiting. Good things that come out of the blue are truly amazing, are they not? I literally fell to my knees and wept. But they can also produce a certain anxiety, like, you didn't choose this, it chose you. And now something's happened to your name, your biography, something very good, and something nonetheless out of your control. It makes me feel better when I think about how this whole thing actually has a lot in common with the act of writing and publishing itself. That is, as writers, we exercise all this control on the page. We labor over every preposition, every clause, and then once our work is published, we set it unto the wind, which has its way with us. It can bring us praise and blame, silence and recognition, wealth and dearth, isolation and community. Our job is as simple as it is difficult, to stay focused on the work and take the ride. I'm not a very superficially punk or iconoclastic person, but like many writers, I have a fierce disobedient streak, which is noticed and frequently lamented by everyone I live with. It involves never wanting to take anyone else's advice, wanting to do everything and learn everything for myself, and insisting on creating new forms and new containers for each new set of thoughts, especially if anyone has so much as dared to intimate that what I want to do can't be done. So ironically, perhaps, I want to end with a piece of very well-known writing advice and a little story about it. It's from The Writing Life by Annie Dillard, and it goes like this. One of the things I know about writing is this: spend it all, shoot it, play it, lose it, all, right away, every time. Do not hoard what seems good for a later book. Give it all now, give it all. The impulse to save something good for a better place later is the signal to spend it now. Something more will arise for later, something better. These things fill from behind and beneath like well water. So I first read these words when I was 17 in high school. The book was on my mother's shelf. I just pulled it down one day and I happened upon them. They felt to me right and true, even if the notion of the writing life, or the idea that I might someday have one, was utterly fantastical. The words felt magnetic, so magnetic, in fact, that they pulled me eventually all the way across the country where Annie became my teacher. Once she was my teacher, I read these words again, and I remember thinking, who the hell does she think she is? How does she know we've got to spend it all right away every time? Is this disguised Christian propaganda? How does she know things will always fill from behind like well water? This is very typical of my thinking. Now, over 30 years and 10 books later, I can say with certainty and gratitude that she was right. People often say that persisting as a writer means just doing it. Well, you already know this. Of course we have to do it if we want it to be done. Less remarked upon, however, is learning to bear the periods of not doing it, the periods in which we allow for the mysterious rhythms of writing, not writing, and living. As French writer Hervé Goubert puts it so beautifully in his journal, "I no longer fear not being able to write, because now I realize that for nearly 10 years I have done nothing but write, and the periods without writing have been no less fertile for writing than the periods of writing." And in the interest of leaving even more fear by the side of the road, I would add that even if and when the well water does not fill up from behind and take the form of literature, so what? There are other measures of our lives. The second part of Annie's advice that has always stuck with me is its conviction about spending it all right away, every time. No cards kept in reserve, sharing freely, generously, bravely, all that you have thought and gathered. That all of that is indeed the road to abundance. I believe this too. I doubt it will come as a surprise to hear that the past 5 years I spent thinking and writing about freedom led me to a similar conclusion. It's not that there aren't moments at which we're called to fight for our freedom or something like that. It's more that whether or not that's what's happening, we benefit from keeping alive the question Fred Moten asks in Stolen Life. What if it's not freedom, but the freedom to give freedom away that is inalienable? I have been thinking about this proposition for a long time now. I am unsure of all it means, but undeniably I am drawn into its orbit. With luck, we will get to keep on thinking about such things together. And now I'm going to have a sip of water and give you the winners of the 2022 Whiting Awards. Okay. All right, here they are, Claire Boyles. The austere and graceful stories of Claire Boyles address some of the most urgent issues of our time: climate change, land possession, advances that seem to leave some behind. Her characters are as turbulent and as vulnerable, as full of terror and beauty as the American West that is their home. A deep anthropologist and a finely restrained rhetorician, Boyles captures the affinities and frictions between those who have been made by that once and still sometimes wild place. At the center of her work is an insistence that we recognize how bound we are to each other by our fears as well as by what we love. Claire Boyles. Man, this is so much fun. All right, Rita Bullwinkle. The stories of Rita Bullwinkle glimmer like objects in a Wunderkammer that shift their shapes when taken up in the hand. Nothing in them seems intended to comfort, and yet the characters' emotional lives, no matter how unsettling, mirror our own, bringing the pleasure and dismay of recognition. This strange, brilliant gem of a collection shocks, yet is this possible? Still manages to remain tender. Witty, bewildering, tart, daring, Bullwinkle sounds simply like herself and no one else. Rita Bullwinkle. Ina Carino. The title of Carino's debut poetry collection is Feast, and it is both evocation and instruction. Rich with ravishing imagery of flesh, sustenance, blood, rites of passage, and the ache of memory, these multilingual poems are both caressing and defiant. She reminds us that what tethers can also sever. Her work thrums with an ancient power like spells or food memories, placing the reader in a fever dream of observation and sensation. Ina Carino. Anthony Cody. How does poetry grow, change, answer the present moment? In the work of Anthony Cody, it stretches the form to become what it describes. These are poems about borders and the refusal of borders, in which the words themselves are held captive, held back, or pushed to the margins. With boldness and formal dexterity, Cody assembles his spectral poems from official records, guidebooks, works of history, maps, laws, and edicts, and the traces of bitter and bloody memory. In this invigorating work, Cody has enlarged what is possible for American poetry. Anthony Cody. Next, we have Anaïs Duplan. Most criticism aims for an authoritative finality of statement. The joy in reading Anaïs Duplan's capacious and incisive writings is to see his thought in the process of its own radical and inclusive making. He refuses to have the last word. This is criticism as pleasure, community, experiment. Duplan's sinuous and improvisatory work devotes itself to the work of others and reveals a writer attuned to the infinite possibilities of human art and identity. Anaïs Duplan. Alexis Pauline Gumbs. In Undrowned, Alexis Pauline Gumbs has written a singular hybrid of hymn, field guide, and self-care manual that urges us to reassess our place among our fellow living beings. Its intellectual risk centers on the premise that love can be our most radical and transformative act. Her tales of sea life, entwined with meditations on Black feminism, become modern fables that offer new methods of feeling and insist, with the best of environmental literature, that protecting the planet's collapsing animal ecologies is vital to saving what makes us human. This wild prose poem is about an other that turns out to be ourselves. Alexis Pauline Gumbs. Megha Mazumdar. Can we find it in ourselves to do what is right, even if it comes with dire consequences? Like Graham Greene, Megha Mazumdar makes complex political scenarios real by showing how ordinary people become enmeshed in forces larger than themselves. Thrilling, lucid, utterly vital, her novel A Burning compresses into its spare form a scathing critique of an entire society. The voices in this story shiver with urgency and anger, at injustice, at society, at their own misfortunes, all of it tempered by Mazumdar's compassionate gaze. This is a book that has the pace of a police procedural and the scope of an epic. Megha Mazumdar. Jesse McCarthy. Jesse McCarthy's thought arrows through time periods, belief systems, literary movements, and aesthetics. His observations on the intersections of history, pop culture, and Black personhood roll over us like an incoming storm of gorgeous sentences. He is not afraid to stake out arguments and hold positions, but he is more interested in exploration than in polemic, and wants above all to honor political and literary complexity. These are clutch-your-throat essays, revelatory, resonant, uncompromising. Dazzling is the only word. Jesse McCarthy. Nana Nkweti. Nana Nkweti can do anything: realism, satire, avant-garde playfulness, essayistic exploration. What remains constant is the vibrancy of her voice, which captures a borough's worth of clamorous experience, and the immediate authority she establishes on the page. Nkweti's astonishing ability to make visible the ebbs and flows of intimacy enriches her stories with lyrical yearning. There's also a slyness here, an irrepressible humor that pushes against assumptions about what it means to be African, an immigrant, young, and defiant in a family or a country that expects silence and obedience. She is a writer whose horizons seem limitless. Nana Nkweti. And the last award goes to Claire Schwartz. The poem A Geography, writes Claire Schwartz in her structurally risky and resonant first book. We do not so much read this collection as walk through it and live in it. The thinking, like the language, is rigorous and urgent. Here is a writer unafraid to use the fullest range of her poetic voice. She is probing, lucid, aphoristic, and poignantly humane. These poem stories are often closer to nightmare than to fairy tale, but always anchored to the world we live in. An astonishingly achieved debut. Claire Schwartz. And I know that you all think you might be tired of clapping, but we're not going to stop. We're going to do a big round of applause for the 10 winners of the 2022 Writing Awards. Thanks, you guys, and I turn it back to Peter.
What a wonderful evening. We look forward to seeing you all at the reception in the lobby just through the doors. On your way out, you'll be handed a chapbook with excerpts from the winners. You'll also notice on the pylons video screens with excerpts. And please look at the books and buy books in the back. The winners' books and Maggie's latest book will be on sale. Masks are optional at the reception, and please enjoy the cocktails and the wine and the food. And I'll see you all out there. Thank you.